Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to help you decide whether you should buy Synology IP cameras for your NAS setup or you should go for Reolink cameras. Now, we have discussed both of these brands a whole heck of a lot here on the channel, but this is the first time I am making a dedicated video comparing these two things, and that's really important because Synology only recently rolled out their surveillance cameras, but they have made a hell of an impact, and there's lots of reasons for that. But there's a number of you that are probably either utilizing Reolink cameras already in your home or business environment, or are on the verge of buying a huge amount of surveillance equipment and are pondering these two, specifically existing Synology NAS users, I might add. So in today's video, we're going to be giving 5 reasons why you should go for the Synology cameras and 5 reasons why you might want to go for the Reolink cameras. But unlike a lot of our other videos, we're going to go back and forth. So throughout the course of this video, we're going to talk about them, we're going to say what's good about them, what's bad about them, and ultimately help you decide which is best for you. So let's crack on with good reason number 1 to go for the Synologies. Come on, it was always going to be the obvious one. The integration by Synology with their surveillance station platform, which by the way is insanely capable and by far the best surveillance software I've ever used personally, notwithstanding the fact it arrives with its own storage system and all the other DSM appliances. I will say right now the integration with their cameras on their surveillance platform is unsurprisingly fantastic. Now, you may not be aware, Synology supports a lot of surveillance brands out there. If you go to Reolink, Hikvision, Amcrest, Axis, loads of them. Synology support thousands of different cameras across many brands. However, the extent to which they can be used varies. The amount of appliances built into the camera may or may not be supported by the Synology system. You may only be able to use it as an on-viv camera, so therefore as a generic camera rather than something more targeted, specific and feature rich. And ultimately it means that going for third-party cameras can more often than not lead to a much more limited surveillance scope of what you can do. Whereas because these cameras are being integrated specifically for surveillance station, the result is that the features and functionality of the cameras is better harnessed by the software, and the software is able to eke the very most out of that hardware. On top of that, and I've mentioned this in my reviews, which may or may not be live already, setting these up is one of the easiest setups I've ever done for a surveillance camera. During all of my reviews of surveillance cameras, getting them integrated into the NAS Brands surveillance software, or even using their own, by the way, if I use Reolink's own software with their own cameras, even then it wasn't as smooth as connecting this camera to my local area network, turning on surveillance station, scanning my local area network, finding the cameras. I didn't have to muck around with 3D barcodes. I didn't have to do any kind of passive or kind of ultra invasive and troublesome connectivity. Of course, it was LAN. We have to factor that in. But still, nonetheless, it gave me the ability to not only set it up for the first time, but set my own password at the beginning. It knew it was a Synology camera. It didn't ask me to start Googling admin passwords and default passwords to reset. It just set up and was seen straight away, and the software allowed me to immediately access all of the edge level recognition, the AI supported person recognition, vehicle recognition, loitering, crowd gathering, smart search. All of those features are supported straight away, as you would expect. But we got to talk about it, the old Wonga, because man alive, the price difference between Reolink and Synology cameras is hefty. If you look at the same hardware that these two cameras from Synology have got, 5 megapixel, I think a little over 2,000 pixel there in one, and 30 frames per second. That hardware, when these cameras are 250 at 300 Nika, you can get the same hardware from Reolink for about 80 to 100 quid. Depending if you go for a Wi-Fi supported one, a non-PoE supported one, a dual lens supported one, all of that sort of stuff maybe cost a little bit more, but ultimately the Reolink cameras will definitely cost more than half the price of the Synology cameras. And if you're going into this surveillance setup being very mindful of the old readies, the Reolink cameras are going to be tremendously appealing for you, and they're not even just new on the scene. They've been around for a long time. I think they're currently celebrating their 14th year in operation, so fair play to them for being around. Synology's been around for almost 25, but still we can't undercut that Reolink's been around, and that price tag for some is going to be damn near irresistible. But you want to talk about irresistible? Why don't we talk about one of the things that businesses, particularly in the US, are going to be hugely drawn to? Now, yes, you've got a couple of different methodologies towards encryption that can be utilized by this device, by these cameras, but that's not exclusive to Synology cameras, it should add. But one of the things that they have over Reolink and a lot of other affordable budget, choose the word of your own choosing, pricing cameras is because these are NDAA and TAA certified. That means they are completely fine to be sold in the US. And also a lot of higher end businesses and enterprise users who want to make sure that their devices are not only secure as possible, but also certified for utilization in the US for whatever reason, to do with insurance, to do with just peace of mind. Particularly, you know, I'm talking about Huawei type stuff here, do some Googling. Definitely right now, people are going to be drawn to that. Now, Reolink is a Chinese company, and again, I've talked about it on the channel. I've talked about Reolink and reviewed their products. I utilize a couple of their products in my own home, but there's no avoiding that if you are running a larger end business, you're going to be mindful of these things. And if you are mindful of these things, these cameras immediately are going to jump in front of a lot of others in terms of utilization and deployment in your own corporate or business world. It's worth highlighting that price tag I mentioned. Yes, these are more expensive, but that's because we're comparing them against cameras that do not have that level of certification. The minute you start comparing them against some of the enterprise level cameras that do have that certification of the same hardware, that price difference minimizes drastically. And I think that is a big concern outside of the home, hobbyist and prosumer market worth considering. However, it's worth also touching on the fact that, remember I said Synology's been around for nearly 25 years and Reolink for about 14 years? It's worth highlighting they've only been in the hardware camera market for about 5 months max, and that was when they were first revealed at the end of 2022. Reolink have been making cameras for 14 years. Now, one of the advantages of that is their range is insane. Now, on here, I've got 4 different kinds of camera from Reolink, but they have literally got hundreds of different versions. It would fill most of this screen if I put nothing but Reolinks here on the camera. They've got everything. They've got outdoor solar-powered cameras. They've got 4G SIM or data plan cameras, PoE, non-PoE, dual lens cameras, dome cameras, pan-tilt zoom cameras, optical zoom, 4K. They have the lot. Synology have just entered the camera market. Surveillance, they've had their surveillance software again for about 2 decades, and it is mwah. But when it comes to the hardware, this is the first and only 2 cameras available right now as of summer 2023. Now that will change, but there's no avoiding that if you have a very bespoke setup where you want a dome camera in the foyer, you want a couple of outdoor bullet cameras, you need some desk mounted cameras, you need some PoE cameras, but you also need some solar, you need some easy to set up cameras, you need some wider angle, some pan-tilt zoom or optical zoom for larger scopes, then Reolink is going to be appealing to you right now. Now again, that might change as Synology expand into this area more and more, but there's still no avoiding that when it comes to ranges, Reolink really are winning that one. But having 20 or 30 different cameras knocking around your business environment is not the be-all, end-all. It's also worth highlighting that it's the software you're going to be utilising. It's the user experience that matters. And in that field of play, these guys and Surveillance Station, I've talked about it before, I've already said it a few times in this video, but I'll say it again. Surveillance Station, particularly version 9.1, is the best out there, and it's included with every Synology NAS. So every Synology NAS has Surveillance Station. It has a couple of camera licenses included, but when you are utilizing their software, whether you're using third-party cameras or not, it's the bee's knees, and the feature set dwarfs that of Reolink software. Reolink software is probably one of the better NVR and standalone client NVR softwares I've seen out there to just surveillance, but again, it's just within that surveillance bubble with very limited concerns with regards to the storage health and storage capabilities. A little bit more on their own NVRs, but not so much. Whereas Surveillance Station is perfectly integrated to a Synology NAS system in order to really make the most of networking capabilities and customization, surveillance capabilities and customization, and storage capabilities and customization. Now, I know this video is about the cameras. However, these cameras are being designed in parallel with that as time wears on, and consequently that software gets the most out of these cameras, and vice versa. To make the most of these cameras, you need that Synology NAS and that software there, in a way that even if you have a Reolink camera with Reolink software, the user experience is not going to be as good as Surveillance Station from Synology with their own cameras like for like. Returning to that subject we mentioned earlier about their range of cameras, as good as Synology's reputation and experience is on the software, you can't fault their experience with the hardware. Notwithstanding that obviously their range means they can span towards little tiny home use and all the way up to enterprise, but it's worth highlighting that they know how to make the most of the hardware, and their innovations with regards to, say, the Argus or Go series, which are solar-powered outdoor pan-tilt zoom Wi-Fi battery-powered cameras, which give you the same features and functionality of some of their more enterprisey indoor cameras, is incredible. Their range of vandal-proof cameras has grown exponentially. Their outdoor cameras and the extent and the lifespan of those cameras and the efficiency that's gone into that hardware is just phenomenal. And then when you look at things like this, the dual lens camera that can cover effectively a region that you would require 2 cameras for in a single field of view. Imagine having 180 degrees of view from a camera. Again, that means that rather than having a camera watching there or a camera there or having to pan tilt zoom, you have one feed that covers the works there. That's something you're not getting from Synology, and I can't see them releasing a dual lens camera too soon. That's because these guys at Reolink have been on the hardware for a lot longer, and therefore they've had a lot more time to R&D the heck out of it. Again, this is something that will minimise over time, no doubt, with Synology's cameras and their own VR platform, but right now, the experience in hardware, I would argue, matches up against the experience in software, and depending on what you need from your deployment, I hate seagulls, this may sway it for you. Another thing that might sway it for you, and particularly existing Synology NAS users, you don't need a license for this. Using their own cameras means you don't have to utilise one of your existing Synology Surveillance Station camera licenses or buy a new one that can retail for about 30 to 50 quid, depending on whether you're buying a bulk pack or single licenses there. If you want to use third-party cameras, you've got to get a license. Now, there are, you can look on the backwaters of the internet and you can probably find little backdoor SSH knockarounds to not have to use those licenses, but one software update later, one security update later, they'll stop working, and when they stop working, that's when you might get burgled. So, but when it comes to the licensing support there's a lot of users that might be looking at SMB, mid-range and higher business deployments that are looking at cameras to deploy, looking at the overall budget at the end. They've bought the NVR surveillance system there in the middle to store it all. They're buying all the switches and the PoE cables, and they're looking at deploying the cameras, and they've suddenly gone, right, well, we're going to have 18 cameras today. How much for licenses? That's right, their lifetime license is sure, but it's going to cost you a lot. So if you go for the Synology cameras that include the license with it, or doesn't require the license, it's all, much of a muchness for a lot of users, the result is that can be a tremendous saving. And depending on the scope of your deployment, that price point there and how and where these cameras are going to be deployed will actually reduce that overall overhead. Yes, if you go for a like-for-like Reolink camera and you include the camera license, the Reolink will still work out cheaper. But once you factor it into all the other points we've discussed, that might too be another tipping point. But moving ever so slightly away from Synology's Surveillance Station, it's worth highlighting that it's not the only gig in town. All the other NAS brands out there have their own surveillance software, and QNAP, for example, have QVR Pro, which has 8 camera licenses with their NAS systems, and there's even QVR Elite for their ZFS platform there, although that uses subscription licenses, and frankly I'm not a big fan of that. But still, nonetheless, the point I'm making is Synology cameras are only supported for use in Synology NAS environments, and therefore if you're not running a Synology NAS setup, or you're not completely tied in to a Synology NAS setup, then that might make third-party brands like Reolink a little bit more appealing, because some of the premier advantages that this brings are within its own ecosystem. Yes, I still maintain Surveillance Station 9.1 is the bee's knees when it comes to NAS software, but I know it's not going to be for everyone. It lacks some features, at least at the time of recording, that other NAS brands and their surveillance platforms, such as QNAP with QVR Pro and adding little AI update modules via Google TPU M2 cards and stuff like that, that might be a little niche, but that might draw you towards other surveillance platforms. And if you are of that mind, suddenly third-party cameras like Reolink stand out a little bit more. But when it comes to support, I do think it's worth highlighting something that gets overlooked a lot, and that is to do with warranty, because the majority of cameras you see in the market have arrived, at least the budget ones anyway, with either 1 or 2 years warranty. And in some cases, the brand will give you 2 years warranty if you buy it from their e-site, and if you buy it from a third-party partner e-site, you might only get 1 year warranty, or you have to pre-register, and if you don't register, you don't get the full warranty. Now, Reolink's position on warranty, it goes up to 2 years. Synology cameras are 3 years, flat out, and the software support, remember, with their surveillance station software is going to be lifetime, effectively, product lifetime at the very least. You're looking at minimum 10 years, maybe 15, close to 20 no doubt, because Synology are going to very much want to maintain these cameras. And right now, with Surveillance Station, there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of limit to that software support long term in terms of firmware updates and more. So not only have you got the 3 years manufacturer's warranty with all of those, when a lot of cameras from Reolink are between 1 and 2 years, but on top of that, there's going to be the software support within their ecosystem, which isn't going to be honoured by third-party cameras long term. And finally, circling back ever so slightly to that subject of price, I do think it's worth highlighting that in terms of overall deployment and looking at the full ROI, it's worth highlighting that the Synology cameras, and indeed the whole Synology surveillance ecosystem, even to a minimum like halfway level, is so much more expensive than going for third party. Now this applies right now to comparing Synology Surveillance Station with Synology cameras and Synology C2 backup compared against Reolink cameras, Reolink NVR or Reolink desktop software, by the way, and utilising their cloud platform that you can get with a number of their cameras, but not all of them, crucially. What I'm saying is, right now, to get a kind of fully featured deployment with either of these two brands costs substantially more on the Synology platform. Yes, you get more features, it's more rugged to support the long-term updates, and just generally it's a better user experience, I would argue, for the price. But there's still no denying it's going to cost you more. Not just the cameras, as we mentioned earlier, but the overall ecosystem. And if you don't take your surveillance that seriously, you might not see a full return on investment. The Reolink one is going to be budget. Not only the cost per camera for their cloud supported stuff there, and the retention policies a little bit more open there, but on top of that, the cameras themselves being a lower price, the fact that you don't need to have an NVR or NAS system, you can get away with just using the SD cards and the cloud platform, whereas the Synology platform requires the NAS to use the cloud platform. You can't have them exclusively, and even an SD card inside these can't be used for direct access, but mainly as SD card edge recording. On the Reolink platform, there's a little bit more flexibility and a lot more affordability open to you, but you do lose out on a lot of the feature experience from the Synology brand there. And ultimately, there is that argument that when you reach this tier in terms of what you want from your surveillance, suddenly value for money increases exponentially on the Synology platform, and the loss of features rears its head on the Reolink platform. Ultimately, these are two different surveillance platforms that are aiming at different target user groups, but also the breadth of those. This is not a hobbyist setup. Yes, novices, hobbyists, home users, and even early tier prosumer users can take advantage of it, but they might not see the full value in it on their setup. The Reolink brand there is a lower price point, lower entry point, and a lot of those lower tier users I've described can take advantage of this. But the minute you move into the bigger echelons, the limitations it can bring, the lack of that certification that we discussed there, and the feature set isn't as rich as that on the Synology. And then it comes down to what you're getting for your money. Ultimately, I hope this video has helped you choose between Reolink or Synology for your surveillance setup. Not just the cameras, but the whole surveillance setup. Let me know if it has in the comments. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know I have. If you want to learn more, we've covered this subject and all of these individual cameras in different videos and reviews. Check them out in the description below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.